Hi, thank you so much, Caroline. Hello, everybody. We're so excited to be here for our e-commerce workshop today. My name is Meredith Medlin, and I serve as the Director of Partnerships and Impact for Accion Opportunity Fund, one of the co-presenters for this event, one of the partners that's involved. We're really excited to be here. I'll be your moderator for today. We are so pleased to collaborate with Hot Bread Kitchen and the Sam Adams Brewing the American Dream program and all the other partners. Accion Opportunity Fund is a national nonprofit organization that provides affordable capital and business resources to entrepreneurs across the country, with a focus on women, entrepreneurs of color, and those who have been locked out of traditional financial systems. But we know that financing is only one piece of a huge web of resources needed for small businesses to succeed. So that's why we work with partners to provide education, coaching, and networking opportunities as well. Since 2008, Accion has partnered with Samuel Adams on the Brewing the American Dream program, with a singular focus on supporting food and beverage business owners with capital, coaching, access to networks, and promotional opportunities to help their businesses grow. This national philanthropic effort has provided over $44 million in loan capital, as well as best-in-class business coaching, completely free of charge, to more than 11,000 small business owners. During this really difficult time for small businesses, our team on the Brewing the American Dream program has changed the way we typically offer that type of business coaching. And we're really excited to invite you to join us for an online coaching event that's actually coming up this Monday in just a few days. So we'll be doing a virtual coaching event where you can have one-on-one or small group coaching sessions directly from e-commerce experts, some of whom are today's panelists. So we invite you to join us. I'm going to drop a link in the chat to sign up for our speed coaching event. And now we're going to go ahead and get into today's discussion. So we'll have an overview of some of the most important considerations for entrepreneurs starting or perfecting their online sales. And I am excited to have our first panelist with us to get ready to get started here. But before we jump into that conversation, I want to remind everybody about a worksheet that you should have received ahead of time. We just dropped the link into the chat for the worksheet that'll help you just think through some of these questions and your goals for e-commerce, kind of give you some guideposts as we have this conversation today. All right, all of the preamble out of the way, let's jump into our first panel discussion about e-commerce technology specifically. Our panelists for this conversation, as you can see, are Jessica Spaulding, Jing, and Desiree Foxwell. Welcome and thank you all for being with us. I'll let you three introduce yourselves just quickly. Let us know who you are and what your company does, and we can start with Jessica.
Hi, my name is Jessica Spaulding. I am the owner and CEO of Harlem Chocolate Factory. We're an artisan chocolate shop based in Harlem. We started in Hot Bread Kitchen in 2015, and now we have our own shop on Adam Clayton Powell in between 138th and 139th.
Awesome. Thanks for being here with us, Jessica. All right, Jing, you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Jing. I'm the founder and CEO of Fly by Jing, and we make all natural, small batch crafted Chinese food products from my hometown of Chengdu. And we sell direct to consumer on our website. And we launched in February of last year after a Kickstarter in 2018. And we're based in Los Angeles.
All right, thanks. And Desiree.
Hi, my name is Desiree. I work with the Boston Beer Company, and my primary role is to run and develop the retail e-stores for the Boston Beer Company. That is the merchandise side, not the beer side.
All right, thanks for being with us, all three of you. Okay, so we're going to jump into today's conversation. So first we'll focus on the experiences, Jing and Jessica, that you all have had running your own businesses and your e-commerce stores. So we'll just start with our first question here. Jing, can you give us an overview of how you've been selling direct to consumer and how that helped you think about what you needed in an e-commerce platform?
Yeah, so we started via Kickstarter, and to me, at the time I was still based in China, so I was living in Shanghai for the last 7 years before I moved to LA, and I just had, seen other brands launch successfully through Kickstarter, seen it as a platform that really celebrated, innovative new products, and had already an inbuilt audience for people who just like to back, companies like this, and that it was a good kind of PR opportunity as well. So started there and was lucky to, on the first day that we went live, we became fully funded, and then ended up raising, I think it was like 400% over what our goal was, which was super exciting. And that was, I think, because of, some press that we got early on, and then just, there is kind of a playbook to doing a successful Kickstarter. There's a lot of prep work. So spent more than a month preparing for it. The day before, had emailed personally like 400 people, everyone I've ever met in my life, and encouraged them to like spread the word and purchase. And so that kind of became a snowball effect. And so that was really great because it, Kickstarter is a platform that allows a bit more flexibility, right? Like the people who are backing you don't expect to receive the product right away. So that gives you some runway to be able to then go and manufacture it. So I used the funds to do my first big manufacturing run. And that was also great because, 6 months later, when we started delivering or shipping these products, that became the initial customer base for my e-commerce website. So I think we kind of got off to a really strong start because these people who, whether it was like my contacts or people who just, were built into the Kickstarter platform, were people who, were kind of the trendsetters, the people that their communities look to for advice on like, cool new food items and things like that. So yeah, through word of mouth, we started to grow quite a lot. In terms of like e-commerce platforms, I chose Shopify just because at the time when we launched in 2019, just last year, it was definitely, Shopify had already built a reputation for being able to cover most of the bases that an e-commerce entrepreneur might need, with really good analytics, really good, ability to control the and give your customers the best possible experience. So that's kind of how I selected it, and decided to, go direct to consumer first because I had no clue, like I'm actually Canadian. This is my first time ever living in the States, and I had no idea about the retail, environment, CPG in the retail environment. And I just, Shopify was straightforward. Yeah, like I could understand how it worked, and there's no delay in receiving funds from customers, and yeah, so
simple's the name of the game.
yeah.
Awesome. All right, and Jessica, how did you decide to on which platform you wanted to use? What were your experiences kind of getting set up with an e-commerce platform? What elements were most important to you there?
For us, our start was a little different. We started with like selling in pop-ups. When I first started my business, I started my business during a business plan competition, and in one of the classroom works for like some business classes I was taking, it was, if you believe in your business, buy the domain. And I had a very limited amount of money, and so like literally buying that domain, yes, $12, kind of took me to zero. And so when I brought the website, I literally just like made something in Adobe. I have a background in graphic design, and I just made something that had our logo and a contact box, and that was our first website. And within 2 weeks, somebody found us. We had no SEO, nothing whatsoever. And they wanted to buy $250 worth of product. Now imagine, I just told y'all that I had the $12 and I was at zero. So that $250 felt like everything, but I
Yeah.
couldn't take it. And so when we started officially with the business, I knew that there were so many intricate parts to e-commerce that I wanted to figure some stuff out. So we actually originally started on Squarespace. When we went, because we didn't necessarily need for people to engage in purchasing from the website, and all they did purchase were our merchandise and website. And Squarespace has a very like, this is the item, here are the variables, and it was a very easy interaction when we're selling like a t-shirt per week and maybe a hat per month. And so it was a very easy kind of interaction there. Once we opened the shop, the game changed a little bit, and we needed the ability to sell in the shop, still do our events and pop-ups, and also run this online store. And we migrated to Shopify because it allowed all those three interactions. And that really made the decision there, and the ability to add on apps, because you just want to provide a kind of easy experience for your customers. And so that kind of pliability made sense for us at that point. I never suggest starting there if you don't need it. So that was our entry into e-commerce.
Yeah, that's a great point of, kind of deciding how much you really do need in terms of technology. You don't want to be lacking and not be able to do some of the things that are so important. But at the same time, if you have several different ways that customers get access to your product, it's nice to have those back-end systems talk to each other, right?
Yes. But you also don't want to it's an area that we feel like we're not overspending in, but it can easily get out of control. Like every time you're building that out, whether it's you, for me, I think I didn't take into account how expensive it was for me to build it out. Like it devours a ton of your time,
Right.
and that costs money. And then also these monthly fees. When you're talking about, $79 to $99 a month over the course of the year, that's $1,200. And it
Mhm.
doesn't feel like a lot, but once you start, like, it doesn't feel like a lot every month, but once you start putting that together, and then all the other, like, adding on apps, like, okay, this app is $5, this app is, $10 and everything, you could easily push yourself into the $150 range, and start to eat up a chunk of like solely profit,
Mhm.
just on a website
Yeah.
that you're not using if you're not truly shipping.
Right. Right.
So
Yeah, those are such important things to think about, how you balance the cost versus the profit there. All right. So our next question, Jing, we'll start with you, and then Jessica, I'd love to hear from you on this as well, because you guys have a little bit of different, as we've just heard, kind of approaches to your customers. But Jing, what have you seen in terms of purchasing trends since you all started? Any sort of customer trends in how they interact with your brand or buy your product, and then have those changed during the pandemic?
Yeah, I mean, I think they've definitely changed during the pandemic. I think we've started out with, consumer base, like I mentioned, from Kickstarter, and just early adopters, people who were excited to explore a new type of condiment, because we make chili oils, which prior to 2018 really wasn't kind of in the common vernacular here, but now it's, every publication has talked about, chili oils, and now it's becoming more and more of a condiment that people have heard about. So, but back then, it was definitely for early adopters, and so a lot of kind of growth through word of mouth. And then I think as the press kind of picked up more and more on it, it became broader and broader of an audience, of a kind of customer base. So moving kind of away from just the, foodie kind of target to a bit more broad. Then when but we've always had very strong repeat customer purchases. So people who have tried it, you can see from the Shopify analytics that they come back for more, whether it's like, topping up their stash or buying for their family and friends. And you can see that they do that on average about 60 days after they make their initial purchase. And then kind of every like 60 days after that. So we've always had kind of very high repeat purchase rates. I'd say probably like every month, the total number of customers, about 30% of them are coming back from, having previously purchased. And then in April, when the lockdown was announced, that kind of was overnight shift for us. We experienced 3 to 5 times as many sales as we normally had, and we could see a real spike, especially in the beginning when people were at home and they were just cooking and sharing on social media. So we were getting tagged in like 10 times as many posts as we normally would, so we've seen a tremendous growth. We've been really lucky because, I think a lot of people prior to COVID still had a normalized purchasing food online. And I think there's not that many food brands that are digitally native like ours. So that became, just this, and in addition to having it delivered easily to your home, it's also one of the propositions of our products is that it can really easily make your home cooking very complex, because these ingredients are unavailable really outside of China. And we put them together in a way that is easy for you to apply on your existing home cooking. Like you don't have to actually learn how to cook something new to use these. You can put it onto your, casserole, your, pasta, your pizza. And so it was just like an easy way. We had a lot of people write to us and tell us that it helped them get through quarantine because it just, was this ease of access to these complex flavors that they can't access otherwise. So but we're really lucky to have had some great coverage during this time, including a big piece in New York Times that was unexpected, but it was in April, and it was about it was about the lockdown, quarantine, and also specifically about our product because we are made in China. And, we did face a lot of xenophobia, right? In the beginning of COVID and throughout the entire existence of this business. But what was really exciting to me was that in the beginning, I was quite concerned about what would happen with our business, whether it's just xenophobia or China-US trade relations souring. But the response that we've had since COVID has really been heartening to see that people supported us more than ever. So I think when the New York Times article hit, we really, accessed the rest of America, whereas before we were just maybe on the coasts.
Yeah. All right, thanks. And Jessica, just quickly, because your business is so community focused and so neighborhood focused, have you seen any new trends in the past, 6 months with the way that folks are interacting with your brand?
Yes. So we had the ability to ship, but we never advertised it. Our problem from the beginning has been we don't have the ability to fulfill the demand. So we had never really advertised that we were shipping. So we never told anybody. We just so happen if you're there, you can buy something.
Mhm.
And even that has been its own thing to manage because we get a lot of traffic. After, I think, with us primarily being kind of retail focused, that first shutdown kind of slowed everything. And then when it came to Mother's Day ripped everything open. When actually before Mother's Day was Teachers Appreciation. Teachers Appreciation ripped everything open. They happened to be like a week away from each other or something like that. I muted myself. That's when I think people discovered like, oh, they ship. Like we still hadn't said anything about it because we're trying to fulfill, like the people who were around locally were just like, oh, we can order online. Like we know we're gonna order it. They were upset, like, oh, now I have to pay to ship it to my house, whatever. But still, like they needed their fix. You can't go nowhere, there's a lot of explosion in the food market in general, just with the fact that people can't have outside experiences. So they're bringing those experiences inside. So we saw a decline in the local area who's like, I could walk to that shop. But then when people who were like from Jersey were like, oh, okay, wait, nah, let me go to the website and see if they're open. They started to ship stuff. By Teachers Appreciation, everybody sent every teacher in their life something. And we had schools ordering for all of their staff, and then Mother's Day right after that. The biggest explosion we've seen is Father's Day. We always do something every year for Father's Day, and we've never seen dads get any love. It's so unfortunate, but it's like we'll open up, we'll have special packs, and they never sell. They never really do anything. And but this Father's Day was one of the biggest holidays that we've ever experienced. And that's because we lost Easter in part of the melee. And, people just, I think that initial, like, all right, we're going to hold on to our money because it is a luxury chocolate, whatever, like not necessarily food that's a part of my everyday thing. This is like a treat that I'm giving myself. But we've seen just an exorbitant amount of like gifting. So we're preparing for like what will likely be our biggest holiday season ever. And just that thing, like if you can get together any kind of gift items or whatever, or just have anything for specific gifting, you're gonna do what you do. You got to be kind of prepared for it at this point. Same with press coverage and everything. This season is about to be insanity.
Yeah, thank you. So with that, I think you're kind of speaking to anticipating my next question a little bit there too, about any specific challenges with e-commerce that you've been able to overcome. It sounds like a big challenge for you all is just keeping up with the demand.
Yes. There are, it's a very intricate thing. People just say like, okay, I'm gonna sell online, right? Like it's like just an extra set of something. And especially when you're talking about food, you have to decide everything about what you're doing, from who you're shipping with, from shipping costs, from your materials costs when shipping. It's an area that can easily get out of control. It seems so easy. Like, all right, if 100 people order from us, I remember when we were like writing our business plan, we're like, well, we're gonna get 100 orders a week, until we realized like, all right, 100 orders a week translates to 100 boxes. That translates to, 100 pieces of fill. That translates to 100 items. That translates to, and then you don't know whether or not that one person's only going to buy one item. They may buy, so many more. And then what is your packing process? And we have a 250 square foot kitchen. And so us trying to get out 500, 600 orders is insane. So we've had to really pivot on how we're going to do this holiday season. And we have a 3PL that'll be distributing all of our bars, things that have higher shelf life, tablets. And you will only be able to come to the store to purchase like our fresh items, our truffles, our bonbons and everything, because we will not be able to survive. And that's going to be an annoyance. And you got to be prepared to answer those questions, because when people look online and they see something that they want to eat, they want to eat it, and they will be very aggressive. I have never answered more emails in all caps about chocolate in my life. And it's a real thing. But if you can kind of like, you can get down to a specific calculation on how it takes, how much time it takes, and what you're able to do, even trying to ship online for this season from our store would be insane. And so we've had to like kind of fall back on that side.
Awesome. Thank you. That makes a lot of sense. So Jing, kind of relatedly, do you have any advice for entrepreneurs who are setting up their first e-commerce store based on, what you've experienced? Any advice? Oh, your audio. There you go.
Yeah, I just answered a question in the Q&A section about what technology. I think there's just so many considerations. Shopify, I think, is like the most seamless e-commerce platform to use. It just, everything's out of the box. Like, I built the website myself without hiring a designer. And with that, if you are selling online, you have to think about fulfillment. So to Jessica's point, picking a 3PL is extremely important. We are about to start on engaging with our third 3PL since we launched. So there's just been no shortage of problems with 3PLs. Nobody likes any of the 3PLs that they work with. So it's, hopefully third time's a charm, but it's so complex. And a lot of 3PLs, I think, promise the world and they cannot deliver on it. So, when choosing a 3PL, you have to consider where are most of your orders coming from. Are they coming from the East Coast or the West Coast, or are they all over the States? And if so, then maybe you need to think about working with 3PL that have multiple locations, because that'll impact your shipping cost. You have to think about, to Jessica's point, what is the price of the product that you're selling? Because shipping cost is no joke. Amazon will have you believe that shipping is free, but it's not. And, for us, for example, we have a tiny jar that is 6 ounces in weight, but it costs us upwards of $10 to ship us every package. We don't charge our customers $10. We charge them $6 if they order only 1 jar, but that means we're paying that $4. You have to build that into your margins. So, it's extremely expensive. It's also like packages will get lost, your stuff will get damaged, your 3PL will misship things that, they'll make mistakes. And a lot of the times you have to absorb that cost as well. So you have to build that in too. And so you'll learn very quickly that, you need the software to help you with customer service. So when people are writing in, constantly about where's my package? Recently we've had all these COVID delays, right? With these shipping carriers like USPS, also straining, but the customer doesn't care about that. They just care about where's their package, right? And so you have to deal with that some way. And there are softwares out there like Zendesk, where you can keep your tickets of all of the customer service inquiries. We have started recently using a software called Gorgias, GORGIAS, and it's a Shopify native app, which means that it is integrated into Shopify. So that means that when somebody writes in, whether it's through your support email, whether it's through chatbot on your website, or even if they text or call, it all gets logged into the Gorgias system. And if you're in that screen, you can actually see what that customer has purchased from your store before, and even the tracking. And so there's a lot of things that can be automated. So if someone's question is, where's my order? You can literally, without having your customer service personnel write them back, you can literally have an automated email that goes out with their tracking, right? So like all these things, we're constantly thinking about how do you automate, how do you streamline? And so there's the customer service side. And then of course you have to deal with your 3PL because they have to then eventually send it. So, so that is a huge consideration. Within Shopify itself, they have all of these add-ons. There's a very basic suite of products. And then they have this app store in Shopify where third parties can create these apps that will make your Shopify selling experience easier. So whether it's, I think I said repeat, recharge. And there's a number of other ones called Bold and other apps that basically allow you to do subscription sales on your website. So if you have a product like coffee or, like chocolate, like, things that people are going to eat on a regular basis, and, you want that recurring revenue, you might need to use one of those apps. And then there's a ton of other apps. You can also, so I mentioned also different kind of payment gateways. So Shopify allows, they will process payment for you using their relationships with the credit card companies. But then you can also open a payment gateway through Amazon and PayPal, because how many times have you gone on a website and you just don't want to pull out your credit card and you just want to sign in and pay with your PayPal account, right? So PayPal, Stripe, and Amazon Pay, we've got that integrated, and actually a huge portion of our sales every month is through those channels. Yeah, I mean, I think there's definitely more, and feel free to ask in the Q&A section.
Yeah, thank you so much, Jing. All right, so now we're going to turn to Desiree. I want to bring you in to talk about a little bit more of sort of a bird's eye view or a different perspective, because you work for a larger company that does a lot of online selling of your merchandise. And so it's a bit of a different set of challenges or opportunities than our entrepreneurs have, but you have so much valuable knowledge. So I just want to start with a question about kind of broadly, how have you seen e-commerce technology and functionality change over the past several years?
Yeah, I mean, the earlier panelists, I think, have really kind of set me up for it, because Shopify is a huge thing because it connects all apps. You can make, most of our buyers today are shopping online through Instagram, and you can purchase right through Instagram by connecting with Shopify. So like from my perspective over the last 10 years, just, social media and the ability to just link to your shop URLs and e-stores through app platforms is just insane. The amount of like flexibility and ease to purchase has just increased even in the last, I mean, obviously COVID was a catalyst for people to get their e-store acts together, if you will. And it's, there are even suppliers out there that are, talking about content that you may have a video online, and underneath the video, they publish things to purchase that are actually inside of the video, and just creating an ecosystem for you to purchase and watch TV at the same time, which is, it's amazing, but also scary as a business manager trying to manage the inventory levels that are being advertised in places you never thought they would be advertised. Another thing that I think has really changed is mobile usage. We have the ability, everybody really has the ability through Google Analytics to kind of see where their audience is coming from. And most of our audience hits our e-store through mobile. And it's important to know, because when you're setting up your e-store, you want to make sure that it's mobile friendly and doesn't just work on traditional laptops or desktops. And then another thing that was alluded to earlier with the forms of payment, like PayPal, Apple Pay, Amazon Pay, that's a whole different world, and it's no longer credit card companies and banks that are only in the game. So those are the biggest changes. I think they're pretty big.
Yeah, I'd say so. I think you touched on this, my next question here, about evaluating what e-commerce vendors or what platforms to use. So we heard from our entrepreneurs that sort of the integration and ease of use made Shopify a good option for them. Of course, there's lots of other options that might work, but what are some of the top criteria that you would think of for making those evaluations?
Yeah, and honestly, these were kind of touched on earlier too, but the audience might have brick and mortar locations as well. So having a platform where it works both for your e-store and your brick and mortar location and can deplete your inventory seamlessly, so you're not selling something that doesn't actually exist, is key for the business model that I run right now. And something that was touched on earlier are fees, and that is just something that adds up. Half of my company uses Square, and literally there's a transactional fee, there's a service fee, and it seems minimal when you're signing up for it in addition to your monthly fee. But unless you've got a serious revenue stream coming in, like that will deplete your margins just as quickly as shipping and packaging will. Another thing that's super important is API. Shopify is nice because it has these built-in apps that are automatically connected to it. You may have an accounting system or an inventory management system that does not connect to the e-store platform that you use. And I think it's important to have the conversations with your e-store rep about, is there an interface for this, or is it all going to be done manual? Because, time is money, as all of you know.
Yeah.
And then I feel like that's probably the biggest thing when choosing.
All right. And so once you make that technology choice, those steps, understanding what integrations are possible, what apps might be useful, how do you have any advice for kind of streamlining the process from producing all the way to actually getting it, to the customer?
Yes, delegate. Because the reality is like, this is a part of your business. It's not all of your business. And hopefully that you have a trusted person that can project lead and understands the brand that you're building, and can really help people get into the minutia of what's important, and allow you to focus on getting the sales to that e-store. If you don't have the luxury of delegating, talk to somebody on Monday about how to get through it.
That's a great idea. Talk to our coaches on Monday. It's good.
For sure.
All right. And then our last question for you, I know you do a lot of this with the merchandise from Boston Beer. How should somebody determine which of their products actually do get sold online? And, if maybe they want to sell it online, or maybe they want to keep it in their brick and mortar. Any advice on how to make those decisions?
Yeah, I mean, first off, if it's brick and mortar versus online, how much is it going to cost you to ship? You may have something that's really awesome that costs all of your margin dollars to ship, so it's probably left best in your brick and mortar. But as far as the initial items, if you aren't somebody that has a competitive set, then you're kind of groundbreaking, and hopefully you're creating the business because you've proven that there's a need. If you are somebody that does have a competitive set to compare yourself to, shop them. What are they doing? What are they selling? And especially look at what's in their sale and clearance sections, so you can avoid, issues that they're potentially having. And then also look at what your indirect competitors are doing. They may be doing something that would work for your model as well. And for me, in this kind of environment, follow as many social media, blogs, accounts that you can, and make sure that they're diverse. Don't just follow food, follow clothing, follow, silly people on TV. You never know who's going to inspire you and who's going to connect with your brand, because that's another way that you can grow your brand, is through collaborating with people. And honestly, if somebody has a large amount of followers and they dig your product, it's best to collaborate with them and kind of grow and hug more people. So I would say
those are great points for sure. Thank you, Desiree.
Yep.
All righty. So we've got some time for questions. I know a lot of folks have been really active in the chat and in the Q&A box, getting your questions answered in real time. But we're just going to come back to a couple of these to make sure, for the good of the whole group, that we talk about a few of these things. And I also do want to call out that so many of these issues around e-commerce are interconnected, and we've touched on marketing and how to build the brand a little bit today. We've also touched on fulfillment a bit, and we have entire segments of this panel later today in a few minutes here that are going to be about those topics as well. So definitely stick around to continue to learn and discuss about those items. But I want to bring up this question, excuse me, that that Angela asked in the Q&A around customer lists and kind of customer management. So Angela's asking if either of you, Jing or Jessica, buy customer lists, or how to decide if that's an effective tactic. And then I would sort of broaden that, add on to that as well, managing those lists of customers. Jing, I think you mentioned that, Shopify kind of helps you manage with Gorgeous. But so Jessica, you said that you don't buy any customer lists. Jing, have you ever thought about doing something like that as well to grow your list?
So not like I guess in terms of, does that refer to like email addresses?
I think so,
yeah. So in terms of email addresses, that's actually super crucial to build your list. And I don't think that necessarily, I think that it's more relevant in B2B that you can buy large lists of potential business customers. I guess there are services where you can purchase consumer email addresses, but I just feel like every consumer target for every brand is so different that, how do you know, so I just don't really know that that's useful in any, but however, if you know who you're going after, you can work to build your list. So whether, it's through giveaways on Instagram, or, where you're like, sign up for this email list in order to win something, win, products, or if it's a pop-up form on your website, when you go into most websites, within 5 seconds, there will be a pop-up form asking for your email. That's how they collect. And so for us, for example, we launched and, we had like 2,000 backers on Kickstarter in the beginning. So those 2,500 emails became like our initial email list. And so there's a lot of different ways that you can build it. You can also even, you could pay in the sense that you could put ads on Facebook. And instead of like ads to, you could on Facebook ads, you can set your goal, whether it's to sell product or to add to a list, So a lot of, I know a lot of even people who, before they launch on Kickstarter, they will go on Facebook and use this like kind of concept that, maybe it's a new invention or like, a new product. They'll create an ad as if that product was already existing. And then, if you're interested, the message is, sign up for more details. And then they collect those email addresses so that when they do launch on Kickstarter, they have a huge list to blast to. And these are people who are already interested in your product.
Mm-hmm. So, that's a great idea. And so you mentioned that you use Gorgeous, the native Shopify app, to kind of manage your customer journey, once they've ordered, and kind of manage that piece. Jessica, do you use any sort of like customer management piece on Shopify, or do you have another way to kind of keep track of the orders and who's ordered before and things like that?
So I excuse me, Lord Jesus. I have found that Shopify's like system for keeping customers has been okay for us. Like I said, we weren't really telling people that we were shipping online, so we didn't really have much to manage there. I will be going to Gorgeous right after this because there's just no way. Like, we've actually just shut down shipping for us, and that's something that I wanted to bring into is for confection and cold shipping. You have a dynamic shift and change in warmer weather. So in that May, June to honestly even early September timeline, you're talking about an increase of shipping costs in the doubling and almost tripling in terms of just materials, if not fast shipping. And it's a significant challenge. We have decided moving forward, until we truly partner with just someone larger, that we will not be able to ship during the summer. The cost is way too exorbitant. We do not have enough space. Like, we would need to purchase pallets of materials that would extend our box shelf life, which is like just keeping that temperature. If we can keep the temperature inside the box under 50, 60 degrees for 4 to 5 days, we're good. But COVID has taken some of those numbers and transferred something that would normally take 2 to 3 days. It is taking like a week and a half. And we had a significant amount of returns during this COVID, process, of people who ordered things and selected ground shipping, and it got to them in 7 days. And for trips that's a day away. Like, we had someone whose chocolate would have been perfectly fine had it not taken 7 days to get there. And those people are not mad at the UPS man, they're mad at you. They somehow believe that you melted the chocolate and poured it into the box, and then, like, do you really think that it left here looking like that? And it's like, those are things that you genuinely have to pay attention to, and find ways around if you're not blocking off certain regions. And like in Shopify, you can ship and have shipping percentages or add-ons versus region. So you can create a region. So we have like a warm weather region, and people ordering from where it is 70, 80, 90, and 100 degrees. You have to order overnight shipping. Now, is the shipping probably cost more than your product? Yes, but it's what you have to do it, because UPS is completely unreliable for a shelf stable product, like for a non-shelf stable product. I mean, and it's incredibly difficult, and you have to truly calculate that, because if you do become dependent on shipping, and you haven't figured out a way to cold ship accurately and effectively and in a cost effective manner, you're kind of setting yourself up to kind of fall on your face. So maybe you are doing things locally until you are able to, you don't have to run the nation. If you're in New York, if you're in a local area, you're not in like a small town with 180, even 180 people. 180 people buying something that's $5 a week, you gonna make enough to support yourself. So you just have to really target what makes sense for your business, and incorporate, like, make a list. What we did is we just made a list of every single problem we could run into. And so customer management has been a personal one, to not have, during this time, while we had all of these issues, we have still been getting 5-star reviews. And that's because they've gotten phone calls from me. Has it been the most stressful thing I've ever done in my entire life? Yes, but it's completely necessary in terms of customer engagement, that that someone gets an apology that comes from me, and an explanation on how, because they don't care. They don't care. They've been waiting for this box to come. They've been tracking it, and they're mad when they open that up and it's not the way that they want it. For this next thing, we're going to need some outside help, because we're talking about, a little bit more than I could personally call. So, I thank you for that. We're going to go gorgeous right after this. So,
That's great. Yeah. I think that is such a great point for us to end this conversation on, Jessica, because what I hear you saying is basically you have to protect your brand and the quality and the reputation across all of these different pieces. So in the experience on the website, in the customer management, in the way the product is delivered, even if that means you kind of have to change the way you operate because you're depending on services that aren't dependable. And it looks like somebody in the chat suggesting that what you're saying is exactly right, that UPS is not super reliable, but USPS is a little bit more
No,
dependable.
USPS is out here. Their shipping delays. They're backed up. They're backed up for weeks. It's not only mail ballots that they messing up, but they're just overwhelmed and overrun. They have this partnership with Amazon. Amazon's delivering packages through them. It's just a whole bunch. So it increased our cost to go the UPS route, but it was just a little bit more. It was a little bit better for us during that time.
Yeah, so I think it's important to know what makes sense where you are and what options are best, because it kind of protects your business across all of these different possible touch points. I think it doesn't surprise me at all because I know you, that you're calling customers to apologize, but even spending that time to do that, it builds the brand, it builds the business. So I think that's great. Alrighty, so we are right about at time for this segment. So I want to thank each of you so much for joining us for this segment. And I feel like I have learned so much about sort of the logistics and technology side of e-commerce. It's so helpful to have the diverse experiences that all three of you bring to the conversation to help our small business audience think through what they want to do next. So Jing and Jessica and Desiree, thank all three of you. Thank you so much for joining us. And we're going to transition now to the second part of our conversation, which is around the legal concerns with e-commerce. And this is something that is sort of like a very fundamental piece of how you're going to set up selling, interstate or possibly even internationally. So this is just a critically important aspect of your implementation. I'm so excited to have Jacki Klosek from Goodwin Proctor, a law firm that has helped so many entrepreneurs through their neighborhood business initiative program. So Jacki, we're so excited to have you with us to discuss these important issues. And so I'll let you take it away.
Thank you so much, Meredith. And thanks for everyone for joining today. I know you want to get to the substance. I'll just be very quick that I'm an attorney with Goodwin, where I've been for 20 years now. Oh my gosh, almost over 20 years. I'm a specialist in privacy, so I deal with a lot of, I provide clients with advice on complex and more simple privacy issues, such as how the policies that they should put in place when interacting with consumers through websites and apps. And I am very interested in pro bono work, and I'm very happy to be here and help you sort through these things as you grow your businesses online.
Fantastic. All right.
All right. If we go to the first slide, please. Okay. So as I noted, we'll talk through some of the key legal and privacy issues about selling products online, going through the terms of service agreements and the privacy policies that you'll need to post, for example. Next slide, please. So what is doing business online? You probably know that better than me, because you're probably doing all kinds of innovative commerce operations these days, but it could be as simple as buying or selling products on a website. You can be the one that provides the platform for sharing media concerning different items. You can collect data from consumers that interact with your site or service or through third-party sites and services. And as I mentioned before, many companies are having their own mobile apps, for ordering products and foods. And you can also be involved in this just by doing online advertising and collecting data from people as they move through social media services and various other services. Next slide, please. So as I noticed at the outset, I'm going to focus on two key legal agreements that you'll need for your website when you're doing e-commerce. The first is the terms of service agreement. And I view this more as, a necessary protection for you, right? This terms of service is going to establish your rules of the road. This is your website, this is your service. If you're going to interact with me through my website, these are the rules I need you to follow. These are the conditions that I put into place. So most of those terms are there, quite frankly, not to protect the consumer, but to protect you as the company. And if you go onto Amazon, Facebook, and any other services that you might use, if you look at the terms of service, you'll see most of that is it's somewhat legalistic language, and it's really designed to protect the company and their intellectual property and their rights should there be any disputes about anything that's going on the website. The other category of kind of legal documents you'll need for your website is in the area of privacy. And this is typically through a privacy policy. Working with, small to large to startup enterprises, I get the question all the time, do I need a privacy policy? And we'll go through when you absolutely need one as a matter of law, and why, even if you don't need one as a matter of law, it's advisable. But there are still some pitfalls that that you can encounter when drafting this. A lot of companies want to be very reassuring and say, I'll never sell your data and I'm going to protect your data with the utmost security. But from a legal point of view, you need to be careful about such statements, because oftentimes, they just can't be 100% accurate. Like, take, for example, that the statement that I'll never share your data. That's usually not accurate, right? Because you'll have some service providers that might have access to someone's data, like the shipper might have access to the address. You may eventually be called into a lawsuit or a governmental demand for information and you need to share it. You may eventually be bought out and you need to share data with the purchaser. So, making those kind of very strong commitments is something you have to be cautious about, and making sure that, not only are you reassuring your customers so they'll want to engage with you, but you're being factually accurate, because once that privacy statement is posted, it becomes a contract that you'll have to live by, and that'll be binding upon you. And then also along the area of privacy, it's not only your privacy policy, but what are you doing with the data? And are you using it for direct marketing, for example? There are different rules that apply to that, to those categories of activity. Okay, next slide, please. And next slide, so the terms of service. Yeah, so I noticed the terms of service is the contract, the agreement that's going to set forth the rules of the road for interactions between you and your customers and your website. As I noted, it's a very legalistic document, and we'll go through some of the more particular terms on the next slide. So at a minimum, you'll want the effective date. As you continue to grow your business, you'll probably see that these documents change, especially the privacy policy. I have one particular client that's very vigilant about making changes to its privacy policy every time it introduces a new service or does a new mode of data collection, and they're also very active and dynamic, so those changes are frequent. And so you'll want to track when that version was in force. The terms of service will also govern what people can and can't do with your website and its apps and services, anything that's available through it. You may have heard about disputes about content, right? That's, the picture that I took of my cake or that's a picture that I may have taken from somewhere else. Those kinds of issues could lead to disputes that our existing intellectual property laws are not always effective at dealing with. So companies typically, in addition to relying upon the existing intellectual property laws like copyright law, they also set forth provisions in their agreement so that should those laws not be sufficient, they can also institute a claim under their agreement. So again, take the example of the company that's selling various foods to eat, maybe, and maybe there's some video instruction about how to cook something, and say someone took that video and put it up on their website. You would be able to rely on the terms of service and the restrictions that you included in that terms of service if you wanted to take action against that person for taking that video. We also include in the terms of service terms about reminding users that they're responsible for security as well, and if there's like a registered login page for the website, that they have to maintain their own username and password privacy, and they shouldn't share those credentials with someone else. You'll also want to reserve the right of the company to change the products, the services, as well as the terms of the agreement. And then there's more specific intellectual property issues about establishing who owns what, right? You might have an interactive site where people can post content and make contributions. You want to address, who owns those contributions and what the privacy and what the intellectual properties rights are with respect to that content, as well as your own content. And then there's a reference to something called the Digital Millennium Copyright Act. This is a provision that allows you to have a safe harbor, to be immune for potential copyright claims if they're perpetrated by someone else. So say I have a website on which I'm selling my greatest falafel, and I allow people to comment on it. And in those comments, someone takes someone else's photographs or videos or other content and shares it on my website. I didn't have responsibility for that, and under the Digital Millennium Copyright Act, I can be immune from any claims related to the copyright infringement that may arise from that user sharing of the content. But there's some procedures you have to follow. You have to file a registration with the Copyright Office, and then have some procedures for taking down that content should it be something that does infringe someone else's rights. So I can share more information about that, and I can answer questions at the end as well, because it's a little bit detailed, but it's something I always recommend because it's a very small filing fee, a very brief paragraph that you have to include in your terms of service, and yet it can provide a lot of protection from third-party copyright infringement. Next slide, please. Yeah, and then just, some additional terms, minimum terms for the terms of service. There are standard contractual provisions that you'll want to include. For example, a provision that limits your liability as the website operator, and that possibly imposes indemnification obligations for your users for certain actions that they might commit. And then there's, there's state law requirements that might impact the provisions that you can legally include in your terms of service. So that's why I'm struggling a bit here, because I wanted to provide some kind of sample terms of service for you all, but as these sentences put forth, I think, or make clear that it's not a matter of just copying someone else's or even taking a form. They do need to be kind of thought out carefully, considering what laws you're subject to, and adjusted accordingly. But we can talk about that at the end, because I want to be as helpful as possible, but I'm also reluctant to, give you a form terms of service that that won't work for you, because things do need to be considered individually. And then, there's miscellaneous terms depending on exactly what you're doing. If you're a service that interacts with third-party services, such as social media services, what are the terms around that? And then finally, there are provisions to deal with third-party payments, of course. Hopefully you'll be selling lots of products, and you'll need to have a way for paying for that. You might use PayPal or Stripe. Some payment processors have very specific language that they want to see included into your terms of service, so you'll have to, again, consider them individually. Next slide, please. Okay, this is my home privacy. This is what I do, I think, 15 hours a day now. So there is emerging body of law. In some jurisdictions, it's more stringent than other about the protection of people's private information. And you need to be, even if it's something very, what you consider as innocuous, just as name, address, billing information, there are laws that regulate that. And in most cases, you will be required to have a privacy policy on your website that explains what you're doing, that complies with these laws, and that is clear and accurate. Next slide. So in the US, we have a mess of privacy laws. There are federal laws that govern specific issues, and there are state laws that vary a whole lot. And if you're operating a website, obviously you're going to be dealing with people from all over different states probably. So unfortunately, you do need to be aware about those differences. At the federal level, the most important thing to remember is we have this Federal Trade Commission, which is not a data protection authority or privacy commission like you have in other countries specifically, but it deals with consumer rights and consumer protections. And they've taken over some jurisdiction for privacy matters. And specifically over the years, they brought cases against folks for having privacy policies that weren't accurate. And so that's, that's one way that you can get in trouble for having a privacy policy that doesn't reflect what you're doing. And then states have different requirements as well. You've probably heard about California. They've had for a long time now something called the California Online Privacy Protection Act, and that was recently taken over by what's called the CCPA, the California Consumer Privacy Act. And that second act that I mentioned, the CCPA, is pretty close to what they have in Europe in some ways, in the sense that it's a very broad, very protective law that requires that you include certain provisions in your privacy policy, but also that you take certain steps to protect consumer data. The one important thing to note about the CCPA, if we're talking with, mostly emerging and startup companies, is that there is a high income threshold. For the law to apply, you have to either have revenues in excess of 25 million per year, or you have to have data on 50,000 or more Californians, or you have to make 50% of your revenues from selling the data of Californians. So I'm guessing we're not meeting that revenue threshold for most, but if you have, a very active website, you might meet the threshold of having 50,000 people in California. And if that's the case, you have to make sure that your privacy policy and your website complies with that California law. And then outside of the US, it gets even more complex. You might have heard of the GDPR that I mentioned briefly ago. That's the European data protection regulation. And it's extremely comprehensive. The good news is if you're not established in Europe at all, and you're operating solely in the United States, you're not likely to fall under jurisdiction of that unless you take some clear steps to target to or market into Europe. So they'll look at things like, whether you provide translated service versions of your website and currency conversion. Do you ship into Europe? Are you doing any marketing? Do you have an app available in one of the app stores in Europe? So those are all things that will be considered as to whether you fall under the European jurisdiction. If you do, you need to comply with the GDPR. And unfortunately, that's not a matter of just having a GDPR compliant privacy policy, but you also need to do a lot of steps in the background. I mean, for comparison, for like a new client, a large corporate non-pro bono client that comes with us for GDPR, a compliance program could be anywhere between like $30,000 and $70,000. It's a big undertaking. But the fines for violating the GDPR are also very, very large. So it's something to be aware of, especially if you have, a sizable market of customers in Europe, or you're doing any active marketing in Europe. Europe's not the only country with privacy laws or jurisdiction. It always comes up because their laws are some of the most comprehensive. But closer to home, Canada has more stringent privacy laws than the United States. I'd kind of put them between Europe and us in America. And they also have pretty stringent rules about unsolicited email marketing, where for most cases you'll need consent of the data subject to send them a marketing email. Okay, next page, please. So as the privacy compliance is a big step, but there's some tips that I would give you as from the outset. You should understand all of the data that you're collecting. This is something I deal with companies all the time, large companies especially. They maybe lose track of data, where it's coming from because there's so much of it. Clearly you'll be collecting data if people place orders on the website, but what else? Is there a newsletter registration? Are you collecting data from third parties? When I logged on, I heard a little bit of the last session and they were talking about, purchasing lists. Are you doing that? Because that has to be considered. So get an understanding of the universe from where you're pulling in any kind of data. Then understand with whom you might be sharing that data. As I said at the outset, I sometimes see these statements saying, we always keep your data secure, we'll never share it. And I said, in my opinion, that's like wrong 99% of the time. There's almost always some sharing, and here's some examples. You might share it with vendors, as I noted. There might be third-party affiliates. Advertisers is another big key one. You might share aggregated data, to perform analytics or otherwise show prospective business company partners, what's going on your website and who your customers are. And there might be social media interplay. You should always understand how long, how you're using the data and for how long. To be, privacy focused, I always encourage companies to focus on this kind of privacy by design framework and not just think about meeting the letter of the law, but think about, data minimization. I know data is important, right, for growing your businesses, but you have to think about, am I collecting more data than I need in such a way that I may cause a headache for me or compliance obligations or potential liabilities. And if someone asks you to delete their data, which is a right under that CCPA and the GDPR, that you're following through and doing that. And that, just more generally, you're not retaining data for longer than you need it to perform your business function. Credit card data is a huge one there, right? In most cases, you won't have access to any credit card data. It'll probably flow through your credit card payment processor. But there's been, I'm sure you can tell me better than I can, but you've probably may have gotten emails or phone calls with people giving their credit card information. You want to discourage that. And if you do receive credit card information, not to retain it. Okay, next slide, please. So who needs a privacy policy? So I mentioned California, right, with this CalOppa law that goes back quite a number of years now. It mandates that all websites that are collecting consumer data in California have a privacy policy. This is different than the more recent CCPA that I mentioned that has those income thresholds and data subject thresholds. That's a newer, more specific law, but if you go back several years, there's a law in the books in California, Delaware, a few other states that basically says, if you're interacting with consumers from our state, you need to have a privacy policy that has these certain minimum terms. So at a very minimal level, even if you're not subject to CCPA, you're going to want to have a privacy policy that meets the requirements of the CalOppa law, and which is again similar to the laws in place with certain other states. And you'll have to have again the effective date, because you might update that. You will want to disclose to users what information you're collecting about them and how you might use it. If consumers are given any choices, that you clearly identify those choices. For example, you might want to share data with third parties for their own marketing purposes. Under another law in California, it all goes back to California, you have to either provide an opt-out or opt-in to that, or if you don't provide either of those choices, you have to comply with these pretty complex audit rights. So you'll definitely want to give a choice about that. And then, obviously, if you're doing any email marketing, that you'll give people choices. The emails should include opt-out language, but you should also have a provision in your privacy policy that tells people how to contact you if they don't want to be contacted any longer. And then there should be some information about how they can contact you if they have questions or concerns about privacy matters. Next slide, please. Children. So one area in the United States where the law is pretty stringent is around children under 13, and there's a federal law on this called COPPA. So we can talk perhaps in the chat or the questions if this is of concern for anyone, but at a high level, if you have a website from which you're knowingly collecting data from kids under 13, so young kids 12 and under, or you have a website that looks something like the screen with a lot of attractive characters or features that are clearly focused at or targeting children, you'll have to comply with COPPA. And that mandates very specific privacy disclosures in your privacy policy, as well as something called verifiable parental consent, which means you have to get consent to the parent or guardian before collecting data from kids. And it's not just a matter of clicking a checkbox on the website. There are very specific ways that you have to choose from to get this VPC. And they can include like a credit card charge on the parent's card, a fax, a video call with the parent. Pretty burdensome obligations for obtaining parental consent, but this is just something to keep in mind. I'm suspecting not a lot of you are focused on kids' websites, or even, I shouldn't say kids' websites, it could be a general website with a portion even directed to kids. This will be a concern. And if you're selling kids' products like cakes for children or something like that, that's not a concern. It's of whether you're collecting data from the children themselves, or having a service that's clearly targeted towards the children themselves. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so this is a little bit challenging if you're an emerging company. We always advise our clients to be careful with their vendors and service providers. Unfortunately, if you're newer, you're probably going to have to accept a lot of the terms that are provided by those larger third-party service providers. Like I wouldn't be able to negotiate with Amazon Web Services for something I want to do myself to have better terms. They're just not going to do it. So, assuming you can't negotiate, you're not in a position to negotiate with one of these parties, then you'll want to, at least understand what their policies and practices are with respect to your information, and choose reputable suppliers. Try to ensure that there's some privacy and confidentiality provisions in the agreement. It may not be as strong as you would like, or that I would recommend if you had some ability to negotiate with these parties. But make sure you understand the agreement that you're entering into. And oftentimes it's like an online agreement that you're just clicking through, but by doing so, you've agreed to a whole bunch of pages of terms. So make sure you look at that and understand. Sometimes, like with Stripe and some payment processors and Google Analytics, they have very specific terms that they want to see included in your privacy policy or terms of use. So you'll want to ensure that you're complying with those agreements if you agree to do that. Next slide, please. And then I'm just going to go quickly through marketing, because I'd love to kind of interact with you with some questions that you might have. So marketing it and mainly by email, calls, and text messages. Next slide, please. In the US, things are fairly easy. There's a law that goes back several years now called the Can Spam Act, which is intended, I guess, to can spam, to eliminate it, but other people say it's you can spam act is really what it means. Because you don't need permission to email anyone under the Can Spam Act. You do have to include specific disclosures in your email marketing. You have to include your physical address, your name of your company, for example. You can't have misleading information like you won the lottery, and then when you click on the email, it's more like, oh, come buy my cakes. And you have to provide a functioning opt-out mechanism and honor that opt-out mechanism. But other than that, in the US, there's not a lot of regulation on sending marketing communications by email. So I do recommend that folks have some kind of marketing manual that they follow, and so you understand exactly what you're doing, especially if the third party is doing it for you. Most of the third parties that will send out email campaigns are set up very well to include these disclosures on the website privacy on the email itself that goes out. But if you're doing anything yourself, make sure that it's you're complying with these labeling requirements and opt-out requirements of Can Spam. Next slide, please. Yeah, I think I pretty much went through that already, just the different requirements of Can Spam. So we can go to the next one. The TCPA is a more stringent law. This is a law that regulates automated calls, all those annoying calls that we get at home, but as well as text for marketing purposes. And it's pretty strict, and it's something that plaintiffs' attorneys do litigate about a lot. So if you are planning to use text messaging for marketing, this is something you have to be a lot more careful with than using email. Essentially, you need prior express written consent to do that. And so you'll want people to have some procedure for signing up at your website where it's very clear that they're agreeing to receive marketing messages via text, and have a mechanism for allowing them to opt out of that. And this is just some more details about the TCPA. But again, if you're contemplating text messages, that's something to take care of, to take a very strong caution on. It's not that you can't do it, but it has to be done in a way that complies with this law. So I'd suggest speaking with legal counsel, or at least doing some of your own research on that online. Next slide. And okay, that was the standard presentation. I will have, I'm happy to entertain some questions.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jacki. This is so helpful to go through all of these really important pieces that I think a lot of small business owners just don't have a minute to think about. So I appreciate the informative presentation. And the good news is that we started getting questions toward the beginning of your presentation that then later your presentation answered. So I'll just run through just to reiterate a couple of these. We had somebody ask about the GDPR and questions around the EU. So I want to make sure I understood correctly that you only are subject to the GDPR if you are expressly marketing to customers in the EU. Is that correct?
That's correct. Or if you're established there. So if you have a subsidiary or something else, if you're just solely based in the United States, it's a matter of whether you're doing something proactive to get Europeans. The example is I'm traveling through Paris, or even I live in Paris and I order something from your website. It's probably not sufficient to get the attention of the French regulators. But if you're doing stuff and making it easy and having products targeted to the local market and doing shipping into Europe, then it's something to be more wary of.
Okay, that makes sense. And is that a similar threshold for the Canadian equivalent of that privacy law in Canada?
No, the Canada law is different. And I would suggest there, it's not enforced against American companies as much as if you're doing a small amount of retail. But if you notice you're having a significant amount of commerce from Canada, I would suggest having Canadian counsel give your website privacy policy and practices a quick review. In most cases, it's if you have a pretty well-developed US focused privacy policy, it's just a little bit more to get compliant with Canadian law, but with Europe, it's a lot more.
Okay. That makes sense. And then, so similarly, we had an additional question around email marketing that I think you just touched on, but just want to make sure we're super clear. So we have somebody who sells a product on eBay, and so collecting the email addresses of his customers through eBay. Is there any issue with using those emails for marketing in the future?
No, generally not. There's some specific rules on like harvesting and using third parties to harvest email. But if you're just collecting businesses' email addresses in the normal course of business, unless you've promised otherwise, you can email them at least that one time. And then if they opt out, then you have to honor that opt out, right?
Got it. Okay, that makes sense. And then are there any differences in these laws when you're marketing a service as opposed to a product? Or does it kind of not matter what you're selling? If you're selling, these laws apply?
Yeah, it doesn't matter. I mean, the one distinction I would make is B2B versus B2C. I mean, a lot of these laws are focused on consumers, like the FTC is focused on consumers. The CalAPA law is focused on consumers. The difference, the GDPR is on anybody, any kind of personally identifiable information. And the California law, even though it's called the California Consumer Privacy Act, it does include business contacts and employee data as well. So generally speaking, most of the requirements are consumer focused and not contingent on a privacy versus a product versus a service. And some of other laws do cover business data and consumer data as well.
Okay. Thank you. All right. And then one last question that we have here. I'm not sure. So we've done work with some of your colleagues at Goodwin in the past around trademark and intellectual property. So I think this sort of bridges some of the e-commerce questions with some IP concerns as well. But we have an entrepreneur who's joining us who has found a social media account by another business based in the UK that is using her same the same name as her business that's based here in the States. Is there anything that this person can do about that kind of possible infringement, or to understand if it is infringement or just a coincidence?
I will defer from this in the fear of giving incorrect advice. I used to be an IP and privacy lawyer, but the last 10 years it's been almost all privacy. So I don't want to give anything incorrect on that. I'm sorry.
That makes sense. Yeah, and it's more complicated by the fact that it's outside of the U.S.
Sure.
I'm sure. Yeah, the international component. But alrighty. So I think this is a great place to pause and wrap up our legal conversation. Thank you so much, Jacki, for being with us. Thank you, everybody, for your questions. And so we'll wrap up this and move to our next segment. We're going to take a quick break. So at 2 o'clock, in just 5 minutes, we'll get started with our conversation about e-commerce fulfillment, which can always be a really challenging part of online sales. And then we'll wrap up our full discussion with a conversation about marketing later in a bit. So thank you again, Jacki, for being with us. And everybody will be back in 5 minutes. All right, everybody, welcome back. Hope you had a nice break. We are going to go ahead and move to the next part of our conversation. We're going to be talking about e-commerce product fulfillment. So our panelists will help us think about these issues that we've already touched on a little bit earlier this morning because everything's so interconnected here. So our conversation will include Mike Van Dorn, who you can see here, and also Mauricio Guzman, who will be on here in just a moment. So welcome and thank you so much for being with us. Mike, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself and then we can go ahead and get started.
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Mike Van Dorn. I oversee logistics and operations for Brodo. We're a bone broth retailer and manufacturer based out of the city. We have retail cafes in Manhattan, a full line of grocery products and Fresh Direct, Whole Foods, folks like that, as well as a e-commerce site that we ship broth around the country, which is why we're here today.
There you go. All righty. So we can jump into our first question here. Can you provide us a little bit of an overview with how you kind of organize yourself or think about fulfillment?
For sure. So as far as Brodo, we work with third-party fulfillment centers. I know that in my sort of past life, I actually used to work with Mauricio at Milk Bar as well. We did first party fulfillment ourselves, which is a little bit different of an animal, which I think Mauricio should have a little bit more specific insight on. But I would say that the name of the game is really keeping yourself organized and really, really trying to keep all of the, all of the various, all the variables in different buckets so that it's, can kind of become as much of an assembly line as humanly possible in terms of getting boxes out the door. That the bulk of my day-to-day is spent in front of on the phone with our fulfillment centers, as well as in front of email and spreadsheets and that kind of thing. I'd say there's a big component of it that is that's data related, which is super exciting, and feels like you have all the kind of the tools right in front of you, but with the third party side of things, it really sort of forces you to be as kind of as on the ball as possible, because you're sort of one step removed from the actual act of fulfilling packages. A lot of the tools that were mentioned earlier in the talk, as far as ShipStation and some of the other the other programs or websites that sort of help facilitate e-commerce, make the segmenting of orders pretty straightforward, as far as understanding, okay, here are all of my 1-day orders that need this specific pack out, all of my 2-day orders that need this specific pack out, and so on and so forth. I think that the biggest piece of it from a day-to-day side, at least for me, is on treating it like, if this order comes in, there's a very specific set of rules and conditions that go into the actual packaging of that, so that every time I see that, okay, I have 6 containers of broth going out the door, I know that it requires 1 of these, 2 of these, 3 of these, as far as the different components of packaging and the different kind of pieces that go into it. It's in sort of starting off, it's definitely a little bit of a kind of guess and check and learning and sort of seeing what works best, as far as getting to a point where you can make it that systemized, because obviously there's a component of starting any business and starting any new platform that involves testing and learning and seeing what works, seeing what doesn't, and then kind of going from there and optimizing. But it's an interesting mix of both being open to trying new things, but also being like super blinders on, as far as keeping the system organized, because as long as everything is organized, it the line can keep moving, and the boxes can literally go out the door and be picked up and delivered to folks. So
there you go, a nice balance between organized and focused, but open to creative options.
Completely, yeah. I would say there's always a bit of productive tension between the operations sort of internal side of things, and then more of the external marketing side of things, as far as how do we be creative and how we do exciting things, but also do it in a way that simple, is easily repeatable, because the easier something that can be repeated, the easier it is to obviously find efficiencies with it, and find ways to do it either quicker or less expensive, or so on and so forth. So
yeah, I think that's actually a great lead into my next question I had for you, is balancing those two kind of sides of the coin that you just explained. So balancing the priorities for the brand or for the product with those kind of tough, rigid, more logistical requirements. How do you guys strike that balance?
for sure. So I would say, especially with what we're doing at Brodo, we sell very high quality, premium priced bone broth. So if someone is paying, $70, $80, $90 to have broth sent to their door, they should be getting, the absolute best experience possible. So trying to kind of take it from the mindset of a customer, as far as, what would I like to see, if I'm kind of putting my trust in this, this random company to send me a perishable product in the mail, how do we make that as good of an experience as possible? So I think there's obviously a whole array of things you can do from a website side of things, as far as the marketing and emails and all the kind of stuff to really build the brand experience. But from a fulfillment side, I really think it starts with the packaging and the the way that you're presenting products to your customers, and then to layer on one step further to that, it's understanding what plays well in an e-commerce space. So if you're a bakery, I wouldn't necessarily recommend sending souffles in the mail, because that is not as great and crazy advanced as the FedExes and UPSs of the world are, there will never be a souffle that is that gets delivered nicely. There may be. I'm not 100% positive, but trying to build around the product so that this product that is going into this box is as protected as possible. If it's perishable, making sure that there's coolant that goes into it so that it stays at the an appropriate temperature, everything stays food safe. And then, it goes down to as well the box that it's going in, the any marketing materials that go inside of that box, all of the pieces that really let you kind of show your brand creativity. There's ways to do that without necessarily having to give up a nice, simple, straightforward, and very efficient pack out. I think especially for smaller companies or smaller brands, it's a little bit overwhelming to start, because there's obviously like an infinite array of options, as well as a kind of a little bit of like trying to keep up with the Joneses of the world, as far as everyone has a printed box and everything, just like, oh my God, everything looks so so professional. And to do that, there's minimums involved, and there's a little bit of it's hard to kind of get off the ground doing that, but there's ways of whether it's stickers going on a box, or really trying to flesh out kind of what's going inside of that box, so that it feels it feels premium, and it feels like you're kind of cutting one piece out of the kind of like space that might exist between an e-commerce customer versus someone walking into your your retail shop or your cafe and being able to have a one-on-one experience with them. So
yeah, those are all such good ideas. It's a tricky balance, but there's definitely ways to get around it. All right, so Mauricio, I'd love to bring you into our conversation. Do you mind just quickly introducing yourself, saying hi? Thanks for being with us.
Yep. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, sound great.
Great. Awesome. Apologies on the delay. Technical difficulties, as always. I'm Mauricio. I actually work at Milk Bar. I am the logistics and distribution manager. I actually worked with Mike for a couple years at Milk Bar, so good friend of mine. Currently managing our direct-to-consumer fulfillment, although it's not necessarily an internal fulfillment at this time. Previously was, but anything moving in and out of the hands of a fulfillment team will likely funnel through me, and then eventually to the customer.
Alrighty. So I'd love to learn a little bit more about that. My first question for you, Mauricio, is around this huge transition that all of us who are, like myself personally, who's a fan of Milk Bar, fan of the products, has seen just this massive transition and growth. Can you talk a little bit about how you all have changed some of your logistics around fulfillment as you've grown and scaled?
For sure. So when I first started, we were probably doing about 50 packages a day. If that on a busy weekday, we're closer to 2,000 shipments packages a day, not just Monday through Friday, but including weekends. So it was definitely a challenge when it came to understanding every second, every minute counts to be able to fill these orders once you scale. So eliminating steps, unnecessary steps, is integral, like for me at least, in terms of what the process should look like. Make it as simple as possible, make it as efficient as possible to be able to succeed as the order volume keeps going up.
Yeah, absolutely. So can you talk a little bit about any challenges that you faced? What are some hurdles, maybe some puzzles that you all had to figure out? Anything that comes to mind?
I think first and foremost is, how do you ship a cake 2-day transit and it make it perfectly decorated? But then again, a lot of testing involved. So there's always probably a precursor that no one really sees. Ship tests, real feedback from not only customers but also employees who know what the product should look like. Was really important in understanding how to successfully ship something and then apply it not only to one package but to do it for thousands.
Yeah, absolutely.
So a lot of that feedback is really duly noted, and Mike can attest to that as well. It's does this foam container work? Does this insulated sleeve actually keep the temperature of the product that we want to do, because we're dealing with perishables? So all of that notes. It's not a science. I'm not a packaging engineer, but we take all of that feedback and apply it for the future tests and then actually applying it on the real line.
Totally. I think I would definitely can attest that it is a little bit more of an art than a science at times, where, I think there's obviously a lot of companies and a lot of folks that are like packaging experts that can, show you an array of different, different kinds of insulation, different kinds of coolant, different kinds of packaging filler. And the only way to really kind of get a sense on, if this works for your application is to test out and try it. And, like Mauricio said, send it to friends, send it to employees, just basically sending it to anyone that, you can get honest feedback from, because it's always, it's always better to get that from someone that you trust and that's a little bit more internal versus, getting that out to a paying customer and then finding out that, like, oh, geez, there is, something catastrophic happened. So.
Yeah, well, and I think it's so great that we have each of you joining the conversation, because the products that you all ship are a little tricky to ship. I mean, with the baked goods and then with broth, I mean, the liquid content, both of those kind of present unique challenges. So it's not as easy as maybe some other products might be. And so I think it's great to hear that you guys have found a way to do it. It's encouraging, I would say.
A lot of blood, sweat, and tears with it. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely a lot of failures at some point, but it comes with it. It's I think testing is integral for any new product line or anything you're trying to introduce. It just has to happen.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Alrighty. So the next question I have for you, Mike, is around, you were talking about using a third party and using fulfillment centers. So we've seen a rise in usage of those kinds of services. So the past few years, it feels like as e-commerce has become more popular, a lot of folks are looking to use fulfillment centers, or we were talking about earlier, using 3PLs, all of those kinds of things. So do you feel like these are a viable option for small companies that are just starting out?
I would say potentially. I think the trickiest part with just starting out is that there's a lot of testing and a lot of learning and a lot of, frankly, changing of how processes go as, you're on week 1, week 2, week 10, week 20. There's a lot of different iterations and a lot of different, just different learnings that come up that can be pretty tricky to do when you're one step removed. It's something that we went through at Brodo, where we've been, we started doing our fulfillment in-house, and then at a certain point, potentially a little bit too prematurely went to a third-party fulfillment center and had a lot of challenges as far as, just making sure that our processes and our systems could sync in and jive with what, with what our fulfillment center's processes were, to make sure that everything was working smoothly. I don't think it's not impossible. I don't know if I would, sort of bake that into the kind of the like immediate plan of like, okay, we're going to get our, we're going to put our website up, we're going to, get in touch with the 3PL and then just kind of go from there. Part of the challenge too, I think, is that there's, there's a lot of research and a lot of, kind of learning and, kind of getting to know each other that goes in with working with a 3PL, where you're basically, you're trusting someone with your bread and butter and your customer experience. So I think getting referrals from others and kind of getting a sense of the lay of the land and trying to educate yourself as much as possible before going into it. But I think one of the, the biggest sort of word of caution or challenge that I think is just, until you're at a point where it's the pack out is pretty seamless and the, kind of the whole like operational flow is figured out, doing the actual fulfillment side of things in-house, can make life a little bit easier as far as giving a little bit more leeway to learn and leeway to try things. On the flip side, obviously, that requires storage space and requires, staff, and there's a whole array of things that then gets into. So it's a little bit of, kind of choose your own adventure. But I think, like we were just saying, trying to bake out time for testing and trying to bake out time for learning is, I think, by far the most important part of it. And acknowledging that, what you think is perfect today in, 6 months, maybe like, oh my, like, geez, that was the worst idea I ever had. Like being able to, be very reflective and being able to kind of learn from the past. So.
Yeah, I feel like the adaptation is so important. Our earlier panelists made a comment about working with a 3PL. It almost never works the first time. It's like, you have to go and dig around a little bit.
Yeah. 100%. Yeah.
It's going to be a frustrating time, but you need to come prepared as well. You need to have the SOPs to present to the 3PL, because they're essentially an operation that specializes in fulfillment. So if we don't have that information ready, written down, to be able to execute for an external partner to execute it, there's going to be a lot of trouble and a lot of disadvantages to moving to a 3PL. But obviously the advantage is if you're in a situation where you've outgrown your space, you're turning away orders or causing delays in your customer experience, where you're not able to fill an order up until 2 weeks out, then I think it's time to look into a 3PL and find the right partner, like Mike said.
Yeah, that's so great. I was about to just ask you what some signals that you might be ready.
If you feel like your fulfillment area is too full, I don't see it. If that's not your passion, if your passion is making the product, making the food, there are warehouses that can alleviate that stress, and you focus on your creativity, while the 3PL takes the logistics out. So totally. I think that's the advantage there. But absolutely, if you've outgrown your space or need to look in, or you're considering moving to a larger warehouse for your own internal fulfillment, does that make sense in terms of, do you want that overhead? Do you want to open up a large facility in that scenario? So I think those are two talking points when it does seem right to move to a 3PL.
All right. And then kind of related to thinking about those costs and kind of evaluating there, Mauricio, what would you say are some hidden expenses or costs that maybe you didn't realize you all were going to incur when you were thinking about the fulfillment piece?
A lot of it ends up being, there's absolutely opportunities with your freight. Where
I was going to say the same thing.
Yeah, if you can plan out all of your movement and transportation ahead of time in advance versus rush to get something there for the next day, like, oh man, I ran out of boxes, but I need to get these boxes to the fulfillment center urgently, it's going to cost you a lot of money, as compared to planning out your forecast properly, understanding what needs to be on hand. Will kind of lessen the blow in terms of the money or the cost for moving items. So Absolutely felt it multiple times where those costs can really play a hit, and no one planned for it. So I think you think you're only going to spend X dollars, but then there's a 20% markup for expedited delivery is really going to hit the bottom line when you see the year end. So I think that's one of the ones that I've come to learn and understand, and Mike and I have talked about it a lot to plan our days a little bit better.
Totally, yeah. I think when we're thinking of fulfillment costs, I think the focus is almost always on, what are my last mile costs of delivering product to my customers, whether it's, what are my shipping rates or, so on and so forth. But I think that hits the nail on the head as far as the inbound freight cost can be this sneaky thing that, if you have enough kind of last minute rush orders, it, whether it's the end of the month, end of the year, end of the quarter, whatever however you're kind of reviewing for financials, the number can kind of shock you of oh geez, that is, in addition to also the just general stress that it adds on. It's not necessarily you can't quantify it in terms of dollars, but I think you can quantify it in terms of headaches or in terms of sort of your overall demeanor. Trying to get ahead of that and trying to keep your forecast in mind, and also update your forecast and not just kind of rest on your laurels with it, especially if you are in a seasonal business. Like for the broth, for example, between the end of August and the end of September, I think our volume increases 3 to 4 times in terms of what's going out the door. So it's a little bit, it's very easy to kind of put yourself into a false state of security and then wake up one day and oh geez, I I did not plan for this. So yeah. And then as far to, I think I would also add to just Mauricio mentioned it earlier, but every second, even if you're doing small volumes, every second does count as far as your staffing costs, and also just kind of the time that's being spent on it. If you can be more efficient at what your fulfillment, that means you can spend more time on all of the other parts of the business that are may or may not be more exciting, or may or may not be adding more sales to your bottom line, that kind of thing. So again, it's not necessarily, there's ways to quantify it, but it's more making sure that your time is being spent in the right spot as far as what's the kind of biggest bang for your buck versus just kind of grinding for the sake of grinding and working hard. So
I think time is often a hidden cost that we don't really think about it in those terms, but we should more. That's for sure. And that brings me to a question with the inbound costs, of getting your boxes sent to you, getting your packing out supplies, those kinds of things. How would you go about figuring out those volumes if you have limited storage space, for the product and for those packing supplies? Have you all ever come across, not only did you run out because, like you were saying, Mauricio, you didn't necessarily plan ahead, but if you don't have enough space for what you think you're going to need?
This is a great Mauricio question.
Amazing question for me, actually. So we actually at Milk Bar, we operate in a facility that's very small in comparison to larger warehouses. So we ordered a lot more frequently. Essentially, once an order of boxes or packaging film arrive, we'd essentially have another order coming right behind it. When you have smaller spaces, you are going to you're going to order more frequently. Essentially, that's what's going to happen. So, but like we mentioned earlier, it's going to take a lot more time to retake that inventory. So someone has to dedicate another 2 hours to place that order, ensure they make the cutoff for the following day, follow up on whether the vendor acknowledged that order itself. So you definitely have to kind of cater your space to what can work, and it'll extend into how many orders you can take, how many shifts you need to plan for. If you need to plan for 1, 2, or 3, because you're all working in that same space. You can't make the place any bigger, but you're going to optimize the space with added shifts and changing things around like that. So 100%, I think it's a very common issue in New York. Make do with what you have. You might not even be on the first floor of a facility. You actually need to account for an elevator that needs to take boxes up and down all day. So with smaller spaces, you end up understanding you need to be on top of your ordering a lot more frequently, and give yourself a little bit of a buffer, because you never know, a truck can get delayed, and it puts the rest of tomorrow's work at jeopardy.
Yeah,
for sure. I think I would also add too trying to be as upfront and transparent as possible with your vendors in terms of, here's the situation, here's kind of what we're up against. Like, I know that, if we know that over the course of the year, we're going to do, 10,000 orders just to throw out or need 10,000 boxes to throw out a number, but I only have space to store, 500 at a time. Being upfront with your vendor and seeing what options might be available as far as, can you place kind of like a blanket order for the year and then sort of pull from that as needed? Does your vendor have any warehousing space or warehouses that they work with to be able to basically kind of, produce all your product, have it sit somewhere and then come to you as needed. And I think also too, part of it is, similar to the kind of the branding question, trying to layer on, what the effective balance is between, like, I know this is a piece of packaging that I absolutely need and it needs to look exactly this way, versus, is there an option that might be a little bit easier to source that you can kind of grow into the higher volume version of it. So I think there's both kind of the internal space side of it, as well as making sure that, you're being transparent with the people you're working with, because the more that they know, the more that, they can help you. So.
Yeah, that's great advice. Just keep talking, keep calling them. All right. And so our last question before we turn to questions from the audience, and I'm really excited to get to some of those practical questions too, is if either of you have any advice about how a business can build in those, what we're talking about, these costly shipping expenses. So whether it's, that you have to pay for the packaging or, the actual cost to get it to the person's door, how do you think about your pricing strategy to build in those shipping costs?
I would say on our side, it's really, so the background of Brodo is we grew out of restaurants. So I think we all have a little bit of a restaurant mentality. The way that I would, think about it is the same way that you would cost out a recipe in a restaurant, as far as, these are all the components that go into it, and how do I make that work? I think a big part of it is, optimizing what you're sending for shipping and for fulfillment. So, sending a 12-pack of cookies through the mail will probably cost you the same as sending a 1-pack or a 2-pack of cookies, but you can charge 12 times the price for that, or some version of that. So optimizing what you're sending so that there's some volume going out. You're looking at a set number of fixed costs. So if I know that every box that I ship is somewhere between $10 and $15 worth of shipping expenses, I know that, okay, that means my price point is either going to have to be in the $30 to $40 range to make that work, or I need to look at other options of things to ship. Is there a way that I can send it through USPS and have it go a little bit slower if it's a non-perishable product, but that also reduces the price pretty dramatically from using a FedEx or a UPS or someone that's a little bit more expedient. So I think it's similar to putting a menu item on a restaurant and saying, okay, how do I sell this in a way that all my costs are accounted for? Just kind of laying those out and understanding all the input costs going into it. You can kind of see where the pain points are, as far as what are the things that what can I tweak and what can I adjust to have the end price to the end customer make sense.
Yeah, I would agree. I know some companies go flat rate shipping, but obviously understand what your average shipping cost is going to be there, and find that medium like Mike was talking about. Don't necessarily want to incur it to the customer in full, where they're charged $30, like the actual shipping rate. I think that will deter customers from making a purchase. So it might be something you do to start, but in the long run, I've clearly seen success in getting the shipping costs down to the customer and figuring out other ways to drop the price point, whether it be, like we said, packaging, slower shipping speed, again, with keeping up with quality and understanding the product needs is perishable with what we work with, understanding what we can reduce on our end to be able to make it and a successful result for the customer. I would even say diversifying our shipping carriers too. There's a moment where say there's a local carrier here in New York that can ship the same package that FedEx would do for $12, $15. They can do it for $8, let's say. We're gonna, again, with a good customer experience, we want to ensure we can go with that carrier, understanding that the business will grow and develop together with the smaller carrier, because there are a lot of different partners that we're seeing come up now because e-com is booming so much. So you're able to kind of play the numbers game a little bit with the carriers themselves.
So related to this, I realize that each of you work in businesses that have either like a brick and mortar or sort of a restaurant, like people can buy your products in person and then also similar products or even the same products online. How do those prices differ, or do they?
So in our case, the products that we sell on e-commerce, it's the list price is the same as what we do in store. The difference is that, the minimum that you can order online are 6 containers of broth versus ordering one in store. So the way that we've structured the cost is that, we know that, okay, if we can get above this $50-$60 threshold, that's when all of the kind of underlying economics start to make sense, versus in store where you're relying a little bit more on volume of shipments going out or volume of orders being made versus the average, like ticket average of our retail stores is like $15-$20 versus our website, which is closer to $100. So it's a little bit different of a ball game, but the list price to a customer is the same in both cases.
Yeah, same with Milk Bar. Brick and mortar and e-com are about the same price, unless there's a specialty item that we put out for seasonality. But list price is the same, both either in store or online. The few things that Milk Bar does offer is like a gift cookie tin. So although the storefronts do offer it, a lot of the customers will come in and just grab the cookie itself. But online, you have to purchase the cookies with the tin itself there. So I think that's where we can justify a shipment and really understand that changing the implications on the e-com side. You do have to buy 6 cookies versus like Mike said, one item.
All right, so we'll turn to some of our questions here. A lot of the questions had to do with these things around keeping costs down or understanding the cost and that kind of thing. So we had one person ask a question earlier about eco-friendly packaging, and if you have thought about eco-friendly and worked that into your margins, and if your customers care. So anything around eco-friendly packaging that either of you can share? Mike, I see you nodding.
Yeah, we all the insulation that we use is it's basically like a cornstarch type material that the kind of film around it can be recycled, and then the actual insulation itself can either be run underwater, it can be composted, or you can use it to start a barbecue, which is like a fire starter type thing. But yeah, we made a conscious decision to go down that road. A lot of our mission and a lot of the verbiage we use is around, we sell a product that's basically made from parts of animals that would otherwise be wasted or not really being used for anything. So that's a large kind of component of what we do as far as a company. But as far as it's the kind of thing that, it is definitely a bit more expensive than, a traditional like styrofoam container or, something that's a little bit less friendly on the environment. But in terms of what we're selling and also the price point that we're selling it at, it's, it's the kind of thing that we don't, I think our customers look to us as, they sort of view us as a company that, I'm kind of buying into an eco-friendly space. And I think that needs to also come across on the packaging we're using as well. So.
Yeah, with Milk Bar, we're not there yet. I know Mike was trying to get us moving in that direction, but it is a project for 2021. We're actually pretty far along with getting eco-friendly packaging, moving away from styrofoam. So almost finalized, actually, to be quite honest. But in early 2021, we should be having updates on all of our packaging as well.
Well, and I know from personal experience that the gift cookie tin makes an excellent magazine holder.
True, a lot of that is reusable. I will say that. Pen holder, 100%, or even just storing other little trinkets at home. So.
Awesome. All right, so we have a couple kind of specific questions around your supplies. So the shipping supplies themselves, do you all have a particular vendor that you've always used for those that you really like? And then what do you, do you use a gel pack? You were speaking about this a little bit, Mike, but what do you actually find is most effective for getting things to customers safely?
Yeah, so it obviously depends on what you're sending. We use dry ice in our packages to keep our broth cold. Obviously that's a little bit more challenging to get set if you're kind of just getting off the ground. We found that the gel packs are great, but they don't necessarily keep things rock solid versus dry ice, which is like -30. Keeps, if you're sending like ice cream or something that needs to be like a solid brick when it arrives, dry ice has definitely been a bit better of an experience than a gel pack, which keeps things cool, but I would say more cold, refrigerator cold versus sort of deep freeze. We use a couple of different folks for our various packaging supplies. There are companies out there that I know that one that I think constantly comes up, especially in sort of the New York area, is a company called All Boxes for sort of a wide array of different supplies. They can sort of help source from various suppliers and kind of consolidate things into one house versus having to go, here's my corrugated box folks, and here's my insulation folks, and here's my, X, Y, and Z. But yeah, I mean, I think it's similar to earlier where, there's like the Ulines of the world and, a ton of other packaging supply folks or packaging supply distributors that you can sample and test and learn and see what makes sense before you begin ordering, tens of thousands of, very specific supplies from someone that's a little bit more specialized. So.
Yeah, we use All Boxes also. Built a relationship at Milk Bar, grew it from them just supplying us ice bricks to a much larger relationship where they have filler paper boxes eventually, and then a ton of the bubble wrap. They have everything you could possibly think of that theoretically you would also order from Uline to get. They will just you just need a blanket order from them. It'll be at a better cost. I would say personally a very good relationship. They're very, very customer friendly. So interacting with them has been phenomenal in the last few years. So All Boxes is another one of our partners that I would say has been very reliable here in New York.
Awesome. All right. Great tip for our New York area folks. And so the last thing, we have just a minute left. I want to go back to the question around 3PL fulfillment centers. How do you shop around for those? Like, how do you find out about other possible options? We were talking about the first one never works out kind of thing. Is it just word of mouth, or how do you find out about potential partners there?
Yeah, it's a little bit word of mouth, a little bit of kind of like, I know a guy who knows a guy who knows a guy, which is always an interesting world to be in. I will say that trade shows, I think, are really, really helpful for this kind of thing. There's a lot, there's a trade show for obviously in a COVID world, it's a little bit slightly different than maybe like a year ago, but there's a lot of, kind of like home delivery specific. I think it's called like the home delivery show, that is a great way to, kind of see a sampling of lots of folks and, get their contact info and start learning who they work with, get references from those people and so on and so forth. But the tried and true method of, talking to other people that are in the same space and seeing if they know anyone and seeing if they know anyone, it's obviously not necessarily the most efficient way of going about it, but I think getting a personal reference and getting a little bit of clarity before just kind of diving in or kind of going off of, kind of a random reference, it's like worth its weight in gold. If I know that Mauricio is happy with someone, I trust that, he's going to put me in the right direction. So.
Yeah, I would say, I mean, a lot of the contracts are obviously non-disclosure, so we can't really talk about it openly, typically. But yeah, you just ask around, like, and then when you see, you'll see other packaging. Like, I get something shipped to me, you kind of figure out, like, trying to understand where it's coming from, and understand the partnership. I personally visited 4 or 5 3PLs before we ended up making a call on the one that we currently work with, at least here in the East Coast. Get a tour, really understand their own operating procedures at the warehouse themselves, and then really, you can even run a couple shipments out of there too, run a couple orders as well, with basic stuff. But I think getting the tour, visiting a few different places is probably worth the trip, just because it's a big call that's going to eventually it's going to lead to a lot of big decisions in a company's future. So absolutely, touring and visiting these 3PLs is critical to making that decision.
All right, always got to test, gotta learn. Awesome. All right, well, thank you both so much for being with us for this segment of our discussion. Mauricio and Mike, it's been great learning from you all. I really appreciate you sharing your experiences and these insights on fulfillment. It's just such a difficult puzzle, and I know everybody's so excited to have a few ideas for how to move forward. So thank you both for being with us.
Totally.
Thank you, guys.
All right, so we are going to transition to our last segment for this workshop, also very important, around marketing and communications and integrating your full kind of marketing plan into how you sell online. And so for this session, we've got Melissa Villanueva and Andrea Warner with us. So nice to have you both with us. And I will just let the two of you introduce yourselves quickly. Tell us who you are and what you do, what company you work for. So Melissa, you want to kick us off? Oh, you're muted, I think. There you go.
I asked if you could hear me, so that's perfect. Hi, everyone. My name is Melissa Villanueva, and I'm the owner and CEO of Brewpoint Coffee. Our story is, I like to ask the question, have you ever looked on Craigslist for an espresso machine, but ended up finding a coffee shop instead? Because that's the story of Brewpoint Coffee. About 6 years ago, me and my 6-month boyfriend found a coffee shop on Craigslist, ended up buying it within a month, and now we have a full-fledged coffee company with 3 cafes, a wholesale roastery, an event space, and a book called Starting and Running a Coffee Shop. So yeah, we are shipping nationwide at this point for both wholesale and for retail purchases.
Awesome. Thanks so much for being here, Melissa. And Andrea, just introduce yourself real quick for us.
All right. Hi, guys. I'm Andrea Warner. I'm with the Boston Beer Company. We brew Sam Adams, Angry Orchard, Truly Hard Seltzer, Twisted Tea. I've been with the Boston Beer Company for about 17 years in different roles through sales. And most recently, before what I'm doing now, I was doing trade marketing and category management. So currently I'm on our e-commerce team, which has been an extremely fun ride. I've been on the team for about 1.5 years now, and it's just been an incredible journey. So I'm super excited to be here with you guys.
Awesome. We're excited to have you. Thank you. All right. So we're going to start this marketing conversation focusing on direct to consumer marketing, and then we'll turn to a more business to business type of conversation because there's, different tactics involved with different customer bases. So Melissa, we can start with you for Brewpoint, how do most of your customers find you? Do they come through the website, through social media? Tell us a little bit about the customer journey for selling online.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I think the way that I've been thinking about it has been about where are all the places that a customer will interact with Brewpoint. And because we are a brick and mortar cafe, I'm going to start there and kind of go from there. So one of the things that we did pretty early on is, in having a cafe, people love to use the internet for free. So we got a Meraki access point, which essentially gets people to sign into our internet using Facebook. So they would check in, they would see our Facebook, they would get all the information they need to know about our business. It would have an access point to our website and all those different pieces. But that really got us a pretty large following on Facebook pretty quickly right away. And it's all people who have already been into our shop, have already experienced us. And so that was a great way for us to build a loyal following pretty quickly, pretty early on. And so when we grew to more cafes, we kind of just did the same thing and kept growing that base of people. Along with that, Facebook was like our first big platform. And I would say for the community we're a part of. So I'm in Elmhurst, Illinois, about 30 minutes from Chicago. There's a lot of Elmhurst Facebook groups. So if I, tagged my company and put stuff up of different marketing or advertising that we were doing on these different groups, whether it was a change of like operations or new products or like a flash product for one day, I would utilize those groups. And that also started gaining a lot of traction back to that one Facebook that we had. From there, we started building our website. Our journey with our website started off because we, literally didn't know what we were doing because we, we're looking for a espresso machine at a coffee shop. We had someone make a website for us, and that was really nice of them. But what was hard about it is that it just wasn't very flexible to everyday changes that small businesses have. And so we were able, we switched from having a custom website to working with Squarespace. And then when we started selling online, we switched to Shopify, which sounds like a lot of people who have used, who are on these panels are talking about. So, so all that being said, we maximized our traffic in shop. We built a community on Facebook. We transferred a lot of that community also to Instagram and our website. And from there, we just have steadily grown in building our traction.
Awesome. Nice holistic approach. I like that. So with those customers coming in from those different avenues, when we're talking about the folks who are online specifically, what is your end goal? Is it to have them learn more about Brewpoint and engage, or is it to definitely make the sale? Do you have a specific goal for that journey in mind, or does it kind of depend on the circumstance?
Yeah, I would say that brand recognition, brand understanding is the biggest piece. So for us, and believing that kind of sales inevitably come in, and opportunity inevitably comes with it. So the mission we have for Brewpoint is we want to build a better world through coffee, and we want to create authentic community spaces. And authentic community spaces aren't, especially now, it's a lot harder to have that in actual cafes and actual like physical spaces, but it's something like that is happening online. Whether how authentic it is, I don't know. But like if we have the ability to build authenticity through our online platforms, like that is meaningful right now, because there's a lot of crap out there in terms of what you see online and the messaging you're hearing and just the overall positivity, negativity, energy that people are experiencing. And so with that being said, I am a big believer that building a brand and building an online community that has a message, that has kind of like that brings people along with them is really key and important. I want to give an example that's entirely different, but what I want to be for our community here in Elmhurst, but just like anyone who knows Brewpoint. And so for me, since the start of the pandemic, well, and everything that's happened since the start of the pandemic. I have been listening to Brene Brown's podcast. That has like been like church for me, because it has been like walking through what it's like for someone that I respect and like really like how she thinks about things. And walking through like how she's thinking about it and how it's impacting her and the studies that she's doing and the world that she's in. And I'm a firm believer that like that kind of vulnerability and messaging and community she's building is in a lot of ways the type of messaging that I'm building with my business as well. It's saying, hey, we're getting shut down, so here's what we're doing, here's what it's like, here's how you can support us, and here's how we want to support the community. When racial tensions are but we're running high in the beginning, like we addressed that, and we talked about what it's like being a minority woman-owned business in Elmhurst, and had those hard conversations and have had to kind of maneuver some of those things. And so it builds, like, there's nothing like building an online community that's authentic and genuine, because like the loyalty that comes with it is, I mean, it's real. It's not just kind of manufactured. And so, that's more important to me for sure.
Absolutely. All right. And do you find that that's something that your customers are really responsive to in an online setting?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's kind of funny. Like when I look at my social media, I'm just like, what are the things that get the most likes, and what are the things that like don't get very much likes? I mean, like anytime I have a social media manager, she does a great job and organizes everything for me. But when me or my husband do any sort of post that's like, hey, we're addressing what's going on right now, that like gets way more engagement than really anything else. Products, I think we could work on and get it at a higher level, but I have different approaches to that make it a lot more engaging.
Okay, well, and that leads me right into my next question. I wanted to ask you about social media integration and kind of how you use social media to drive traffic or to meet business goals.
Yeah. So there's a couple different things. I mean, if you are building a brand that is building an online community, especially during the COVID era, I will make one note, and this is not exactly answering your question, but I'll get back to it, is having a pulse of what's going on in your online community. So with COVID, it's been so fascinating figuring out what products sell and what products don't during COVID, and like different phases that like our community is in, because at certain phases, like we did a Brewpoint care package where, you can get 2 bags of coffee, one of our like in-house syrups, and one of our like the milks that, one of our non-dairy milks. And like that sold a ton in the beginning of COVID. And I don't think it would ever have sold before COVID, and it's not really selling now. But if we go on lockdown again, I'm 100% sure it's going to like go up again. So it is really interesting to see like what products are relevant to the different phases of like ways people can have coffee essentially. So that's something I'll mention. But with that being said, in terms of social media and how I engage with our social media to essentially build sales for our company. So every time we launch a new product, and depending on what it is, I have 2 approaches. Either I'm looking purely on a brand standpoint, and so I work with a number of influencers who know Brewpoint, who have worked with Brewpoint, or have like I've like seen throughout the time in which like they've either posted about us or liked us or wrote a blog about us. And so I use a app on Shopify called Carro, Carro. And that essentially dives into our online contact, or like our website contacts, our social media contacts, and my emails. And it finds the people who are already connected to Brewpoint, and it finds their profiles on Instagram specifically, and it finds how many followers they have and what their engagement level is and their contact info. And so that has been really cool, because it just organizes it, makes it really easy to find, hey, so here are the 10 influencers who are above 10,000 followers who have pretty decent engagement. And we choose, which ones we want to send our products to for free, and say, hey, like if you're like, I want to send you this for free. If you love it, it'd be awesome if you did a story on us and just tagged us. And if you really love it, like it'd be amazing if you did a post about it, but like no worries if you don't like really love it. And most of the time people are pretty pumped to get free coffee. So that has been a great way for us to launch a new line of things. So for us, I just did this past week with our Gold Series coffees. So we just launched our first Gesha coffee, which is like one of the most rare coffees that oftentimes can go for like $100 a bag. The one we have is like $25 a bag, so it's not as crazy, but we wanted to like launch off our Gold Series with just some really neat people talking about it. So I also look at, alignment of values when I look at people's pages, and I reach out directly as the owner of my company. So it is more of this authentic approach. So that is one way in which we really engage with building our brand and sales specifically online. The second.
Oh, you just muted.
Sorry about that.
No.
Yep. The second piece is how often we do giveaways. So we used to do Facebook and Instagram advertising, and it can get like $100 for a couple weeks or something of that sort for different things like products we're launching. But we noticed very quickly that every time we launch a new product, the best way to get it out there to our community was to do a giveaway. We would get, I think it was something along the lines, an average giveaway that we do on our social media platform gets between 400 to 600 likes, 400 to 600 comments. And what we've given at the end of the day is like a $30 gift card. And so it's kind of crazy in terms of like best bang for your buck. And like, if you've built that loyal customer base who gets pumped about your drinks or gets pumped about your coffee and just getting free things, and it also like builds more engagement throughout all their posts as well, because they're on your page and they're commenting every single one with their friends they're tagging like each friend individually on your post. So if it's helpful, I can give like exactly what we do for giveaways.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So
that's a great idea.
Yeah, so I would say we do our giveaways about once a month, or around any time we have we have a new product line that we're launching. So what we do is, we just say, hey, here's what we're giving away, and we say all you have to do is like this post, make sure you're following us, and tag one friend in each comment below to enter in. And so it's super simple, and each person just gets tagged. And there's a lot of like different generators you can put up online, or you can like, once you count all your comments, you can do a number chooser essentially online that can you do 1 through 100, and it'll choose a random number, and then you just count to whatever name is that number in order to choose the winner. And so that's how we do it. We give about 3 days and just see how many people get engaged with it. People share it a lot as well. And from what I hear, Instagram prioritizes sharing a lot in terms of boosting up people seeing your Instagram posts. So yeah.
Right. That's such a great way to think about kind of directly interacting with your customers, especially right now when people can't come to the shop, as much. It's great to learn what you're doing to engage online. So thank you.
Absolutely.
All right, so we are going to turn more to the business to business side of marketing and communications. And Andrea, I want to bring you into the conversation to talk a little bit about this. So how do you think the pandemic specifically has impacted this e-commerce landscape for, maybe for smaller brands, but also for the bigger brands that you work on?
Yeah, no, it's crazy, right? And I don't think I clarified what my role was on the e-commerce team when I gave my introduction. So I work on our marketplace assortment and activation. So I work hand in hand with our sales strategy managers. So we have folks that are dedicated to working closely with our national account team and our large strategic retailers, as well as our syndication providers, and then intertwined with our brand and IT teams. But overall, I mean, since COVID, you talk to any of our partners and it's like light years ahead, right? But people estimate we've grown, like most retailers are seeing like a 3 to 5 year jump. So these new behaviors are absolutely being formed and adapted. And when it comes to where, all of our business partners are, it's really been a test of like how easily you can adapt and how quickly you can adapt. And I think Melissa gave some really good examples on how they've been able to do that. But it's also, I think there's absolutely been some challenges. The business has shifted. When you look at our on-premise versus off-premise business, people have definitely migrated to the off-premise and people are bringing everything home. But then I think it also creates some opportunities where you do have people forming these habits and practices, and the number of users in all of these marketplaces, and just overall people looking for opportunities to bring home or order online for these different occasions, and those expanding. I do think it's creating opportunities. So if retailers or products have that opportunity to flex and adapt to the time, I think it really has created an opportunity. So.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like all we hear right now is if a small business can adapt, then it's going to be successful. It's a difficult time though, for sure.
For sure.
So when thinking about if we have small businesses who are interested in getting on like a large retailer's website, so we have folks who already supply for Whole Foods or Jewel Osco or Safeway, all these different large retailers. When trying to show up on those kinds of websites, what are some factors to consider? What do the retailers want to see?
Yeah. So it really comes down to availability and visibility, right? So is the product in store, and how are they making the decision of what goes online? And it also depends on if you're talking about the retailer's site versus any marketplaces that they might play in. Okay. So for instance, in Albertsons, Safeway, Vons, Jewel Osco, they may have their own site, but then they also show up in different places like Instacart and things like that, and they may be different. So it really comes down to getting in touch with the right people, and making sure the product's available, turned on. And then when it is available, a lot of times there's requirements there about, does the product have an image? And then, because obviously that's going to influence the shopper and how they're going to much more likely be, someone that's going to choose a product with an image versus no image. Is the product accurate? But then from there, I think you typically, there's a person that's managing the e-commerce sales versus the category sales too. And I think that's really key. And something I've learned coming into this team is, we're very fortunate. We have a very strong national account team. And so we're able to leverage those relationships with our national account team and category buyers to find the person who's accountable to the e-commerce sales, because most often they're totally different. And then they can help us find the right people to make sure the product is available. And some retailers who are more developed have very specific guidelines on what they're looking for a product to be A+ on their website and to drive the most sales and conversion. But others may not. And those are areas that you might be able to bring some ideas and best practices.
Okay. Yeah, that was going to be my next question for you, actually, is finding the right person who manages the e-commerce. So it sounds like you should just go through whatever relationship you currently have and ask, who the e-commerce person is.
Yeah, I would definitely start there if there's a relationship. That's where we tend to start, but there's definitely places we don't have relationships, right? So you got to get a little more scrappy. So, depending on what the product is and where it fits in within a large retailer, obviously you have lots of opportunities, and I'm sure they've been brought up here with some of the social opportunities, finding the folks, the LinkedIn opportunities, if you don't already know somebody, going through your contacts and network that may also be linked to that retailer. But then worst case, go into the store, find somebody that works in that department, who owns the department in the store. And a lot of times, if you can sell them on the opportunity in store, they can lead you to, up the ladder to somebody who can actually make some decisions chain wide. So, but when we do that, I would definitely say one thing is just to get creative, right? So when you get in that store, give them a reason to want the product. But then when you get the opportunity, don't just be a knock on the door, but also be, show up with something creative and fun to get their attention. Always have that nugget of here's what, this is going to bring to you. So for us, we're very lucky. So for alcohol beverage in general, when you add it to a basket, it increases the basket ring significantly. So that's a big strength for us. But on the flip side, the opportunity is that, as different states have opened up the opportunity to order online for beer and alcohol, that's much slower than a lot of other categories. So while the strength is that we bring a lot of profit, the opportunity is that there's really low awareness, or at least there has been. It's definitely grown in the last 6 months, which is great for us. But knowing those different things and bringing that opportunity to them, that might be a way to also say, hey, we have an opportunity to expand your awareness of beer, which is ultimately going to leverage you more, a higher ring basket when people are ordering online. So.
Yeah, I think that you are so perfectly anticipating my next question, which is just if you have any kind of examples of that creativity, kind of thinking outside the box that you were talking about. And I think speaking about the challenges or the opportunity and the strength is a great way to think about that. But do you have any examples of maybe some things that your team has done to get a little bit creative with your e-commerce?
Yeah. So with the e-commerce side, well, I would say it's all in all, like, I would say it kind of goes hand in hand, whether it's e-commerce or anything else. We have a gentleman on our team who has been pretty successful in getting in touch with the right people by using LinkedIn. But then he also has gotten creative. So, finding tidbits about who does what and then using LinkedIn to get to them. But I think on the flip side, you have the creativity that has worked for not only e-commerce, but even just general, getting the foot in the door, so to speak. And actually it kind of lays into this actual example. So he was having trouble getting somebody to call him back, and he just wanted to get his foot in the door. So it was this is more for an on-premise example. It was like a taco restaurant. And he put together basically a bucket, and it was a bucket of our beer, but also some hot sauce from one of our Bring the American Dream partners. It was some socks that one of his friends owned, a local shop that had made socks, and they had little chili peppers on them. And he put this whole bucket together that was like different and like things you wouldn't expect. Even put a mannequin's foot in there, and said, I'm just trying to get my foot in the door. Can you give me a call back? And eventually they did. They called him back from that. So, he had tried just sending emails and phone calls and things like that. But, that little extra something goes so far. And Melissa talked about great ways that goes far with the shopper and the end consumer, but it also goes really far with those retailers who are getting thousands of emails and phone calls for people trying to get their products in the door. So all those little things help. And I actually had an example, but I think Melissa spoke to it too. And just this whole like COVID situation, like those folks that were able to, maybe they typically did take out, but if they're able to like switch to selling those groceries online for the time being, or create meal kits to like bring it home and actually make it yourself, or put the recipes online. And then, you know what I mean? Like some of those things. So get creative and just ultimately be able to flex and adapt for sure.
Yeah, that's such a good
It makes such a difference.
That they're so integrated, right? That, if you are hoping to be sold on a retailer's e-commerce site, hopefully that means you also want to be sold in their physical store. It's a multifaceted relationship. So if you can get some traction on one side, you can kind of also get it for the other side as well.
Yeah. And to that point, I would say that it is really key to also, like, if you're working with a retailer and you get it on the shelf, be certain to ask the question, how does it get online as well? Mm-hmm. Because it's not in most cases automatic. A lot of cases it is, but there are a lot of cases where it's not. So always ask that question. And then once it is on the shelf, make sure it's got your product image. And then the other thing I was just going to throw out, and I think you asked something about this earlier, was just that when you get the product placed, have the image, that's so key, but also have it titled accurately. And that is like, those are like the couple of things that we really focus on, because if it's titled accurately, like for instance, if you've got Sam Adams versus Sam Adams beer, if somebody searches beer, Sam Adams isn't going to come up necessarily. You know what I mean? So it's having the right products. And if you're not sure which keywords are going to help you with that search, which is so key, utilize your Google Analytics and ask your retailers and partners for what some of those top search words are that are getting people to your product.
Yeah, that's such a good point. The little things, those tiny details are so critical though.
Absolutely.
Sure. All right. Well, thank you so much. This is so informative. I feel like I've learned so much today. It's incredible. But so we're going to take some questions from our live audience as well now. So folks, feel free to use the Q&A to ask us some questions. We've already been answering some of them with the chat as well. But Melissa, we had a question that I think you can help us answer. You spoke about having a social media manager earlier, but somebody's wondering about the time invested in the social media. I'm sure when you guys were first starting Brewpoint, wearing so many different hats, how did you decide how much time to spend? And then sort of when did you realize you were hitting a critical point where you needed to hire some help for that part of the business?
Yeah. Social media is such an interesting thing because like a lot of it involves, like some of it is organized and you can prep and do it beforehand and you can be like, this is my week of posts. But then a lot of, I think what people are looking for is just like real time posts of like what's going on, what you're doing, things of that sort. And so it is this mix. So when I started Brewpoint, I did all my social media, and that took me a couple hours a week because I was maybe doing 3 to 4 posts a week. And it was just more off the cuff. We're doing this thing, quick little paragraph, sent it out with a photo from my phone. And then I wanted to, as we got bigger, I started getting interns helping me out with that. And I'm not sure, with interns, it was interesting because like sometimes they would spend a lot of time on very specific things, kind of unnecessarily, but it was interesting for them. And so, at this point with the company that we want to have about 6 posts a week between Instagram and Facebook. And so it takes my social media manager about 5 to 7 hours to organize the agenda I've given her, put it all on Trello. And then we put it in later. It's probably not the most efficient way to do all this, but it works for us. So she puts everything in Trello. She creates all the content, uses photos from our photographers that come through. And then I approve them, and then she puts it into later. And then in later, she times out when the post goes out, and then it just automatically goes out. So on her end, maybe it's 5 to 10 hours. And then for me, it's like 2 to 3 a week. But that she also does stories. I also randomly do stories. I have some staff who do AMAs. And so they do Ask Me Anything. And it's not even really about Brewpoint. And they just kind of, I trust them to go and, talk to our customer base in a fun and engaging way. And, there's things like we have one coming up where they're just going to eat waffles, and they're just we're about to have like a waffle partnership. And so they're going to eat waffles and answer questions. They want to do a musical one, or maybe I want them to do a musical one. I'm not sure. But all that creativity can take a lot of time. So that's easily a couple hours to figure out as well.
All right. So for the scheduling, just to get real technical here. So you use Trello and any other sort of like apps or services for the social media scheduling?
Yeah. So Trello essentially gives it so that we can do like on this day at this time, here's the post, here's the photo I'm using, and here's the content I'm putting out. So I approve that. And then once it's approved, she puts it in later. So in later, it just automatically posts. So she doesn't have to be like, if we wanted to post at 5 a.m. for some reason, like she doesn't have to be awake. So she doesn't have to be thinking, she can do it at whatever time that she wants to, because it's already timed to go off in both on Facebook and Instagram.
Got it. All right, that makes sense. And so another kind of related question about the You have the integration, I think, I've seen your site with your social media and your website. Did you design the website with that in mind, or was that like a feature of the website service you used, or how did that work?
It was something I knew I wanted, but I am both like the things you can do on Shopify essentially gave me the path of what I focused on. So there's a little bit less integration with Facebook. There's a little bit more integration with Instagram. Different platforms allow you to do different things. And so, you work within the confines of that. But also with Shopify, there's a lot of apps. So you just type in whatever you're looking for. And oftentimes either someone has already created it and you can, download it and put it into your website, or you could hire someone to help you do that as well. So,
okay. All right. Well, so I'm looking at the time now. I think we have come to the end of the conversation for today, but I want to thank both of you, Melissa and Andrea, for joining us and for sharing all of your experience and your insights with us. It's so helpful. And these are the kinds of questions that people just don't ever really get this kind of firsthand access to the expertise that you both have. So thank you both so much for being with us today. And want to thank all of our panelists throughout the afternoon who've been with us. We so appreciate everybody's willingness to give us time and expertise. And so I'm really appreciative of everybody for hanging with us today, and want to thank our friends at Sam Adams for partnering with us consistently on the Brewing the American Dream program. And of course, to our hosts at Hot Bread Kitchen, who've just been so fantastic with this multi-day forum that benefits this whole food ecosystem. So thank you so much. We will see you again soon. I'm going to hand it over to Caroline.